All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Sean from RPH Ally, and we are joined today with Bruce Berger, and we're going to dive into motivational interviewing because this is an important course, CE that and skill really that we all need to learn as health professionals. But first, I want to introduce Bruce. Bruce, I'm going to have him introduce himself. Bruce, can you give us a little bit of background and why you're here today with us at RPH Ally?
Yeah, I'm actually a former recovering community pharmacist, and
So am I.
yeah, and I went to Ohio, got my bachelor's degree from the Ohio State University. So I'm still a little bit in grieving right now although I sent my son to Georgia, so it worked out okay. In any case, after practicing pharmacy a few years, I went back to graduate school and got a PhD focused on health psychology and health communication. Mostly, I was interested in understanding how the relationship with the pharmacist and patient, or patient and healthcare professional, predicts or doesn't predict treatment adherence and treatment outcomes. And so I came upon motivational interviewing almost 40 years ago. It was originally developed for people by a clinical psychologist named William Miller to deal with substance abuse issues. And to this day, it is still the most successful intervention in terms of the lowest rate of relapse. And I started thinking to myself, my goodness, if he could do this with people who are abusing substances, can't we use it to be effective for people with chronic illnesses like high blood pressure, diabetes, and all the reason? I mean, it's one of the most researched, evidence-based interventions. What's interesting to me, Sean, is the schools of medicine, nursing, and pharmacy all talk about evidence-based medicine, right? What they don't talk about is evidence-based communication. I mean, we have evidence that there's a way to do this to improve, adherence and outcomes, and yet we hardly teach it. And I've got a book and an e-learning course, and for example, we got a call from Biogen Idec one day. They got a drug called Avonex, had a 13% dropout rate. We did a clinical control trial, and the only difference between the treatment and the control group were MI interventions, motivational interviewing interventions. We dropped their dropout rate to 1.2%.
Wow.
So it's highly effective. It's patient-centered, and it's kind of a misnomer in that it's not about motivating patients. If people think their job is to motivate a patient, they have an impossible job. It's about exploring a patient's motivation. So if a patient's not adherent, or they're not even sure they want to take a medicine that they need, it's about how do we explore that in a way that doesn't put the patient off, that doesn't cause defensiveness. And it's not just used for medication adherence, it's used for tobacco cessation, weight loss. It's very interesting. We've all lived through COVID, and one of the highest causes of death related to COVID is obesity. And we hardly even talk about it. And we went through this period of, I watched the news saying, we got to convince these patients they need to get COVID vaccines. And convincing people to do something they're not ready to do is the absolute worst strategy. And yet it's the primary strategy we use in healthcare.
Fascinating. I know it. How would you? Okay, so I love how you led with your recovering community pharmacist, right? We all know what that means.
Well, I was fortunate. I kind of grew up in an independent pharmacy. I did work for a chain for a while, but it's not quite like it is now.
No, most likely not. No, I mean, I got out in 2016, and it's nothing compared to what it is now from then. So,
right.
How would a community pharmacist, make an impact, provide better outcomes using motivational interviewing? Like, can you give us a good example of this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but I'm the professional health coach also for Aspen RX Health, and they're one of the biggest MTM companies in the country. And of course, those pharmacists don't dispense drugs. They make calls for companies like Humana and United Healthcare. for CMS, for Medicare patients. And so we're trying to build a culture of patient-centered pharmacy with Aspen. So here's an example, for example, that could be a community pharmacy or MTM example. Patient from their records is taking their medication, their blood pressure medication, on average 4 days a week, right? Here's what we hear the typical healthcare professional do. Typical healthcare professional calls the patient or talks to the patient face to face. Hey, Mr. Jones, we notice you're only taking your lisinopril 4 days a week. You really need to take it every day if you want to get your blood pressure down. And typically what you end up hearing is the patient goes, okay, I know, I need to do better. And so guess what happens the next time the refill comes around? They're still taking it 4 days a week, right? So what I do is I ask pharmacists, when you tell this patient you need to take it 7 days a week, what do you learn? And most of the time they look at me and they go, what do you mean? I said, what do you learn when you tell the patient you need to take it 7 days a week? And they go, I guess nothing. And I said, that's correct. I said, that's absolutely correct. I said, what would happen if you looked at the same patient and said, hey, Mr. Jones, we notice you're taking your lisinopril 4 days a week. That's a really good start at getting your blood pressure under control. What's made it important for you to take it on those 4 days? Will we learn something?
Probably.
We'll learn something about how this patient sees the world and what's motivating them on those 4 days. Is that something we can use for the other 3? Does this patient even understand that just because they feel okay doesn't mean their blood pressure is not elevated, right? And so, or another example, I was listening to a pharmacist talk to a patient. She has diabetes. She takes her medicine like clockwork. Her A1C remains elevated. Why? If you listen to her, she'll say, I'll take the medicine, but I'm not changing my eating habits and don't expect me to exercise. I hate to exercise. The response was, well, taking the medicine alone is not enough. And do you hear the comma stupid at the end of that sentence without it being said? I always tell pharmacists, if you say something and you can add the word stupid and it doesn't change your meaning, you're going down the wrong path. Okay. And it does nothing to recognize that she's taking the medicine. So motivational interviewing would say, you look at her and say, I'm really glad to hear that you're taking your medicine every day. That's such an important step at getting your diabetes under control. What's made taking your medicine every day important to you? Because I want to learn, there's some motivation there that's causing her to take her medicine. I want to know what it is. And I want to explore why she won't change any of her eating habits or why she doesn't want to exercise. But if I first acknowledge what she is doing and why she's doing it, I may be able to use some of that motivation to bring in the other 2 things. And also help her understand how the medicine alone is not enough without those other 2 things. But we don't do it by beating people over the head. We do it by developing rapport, and we do it by exploring how is this patient making sense of their illness and its treatment.
That's awesome. Fascinating stuff. And, how many times have we done that in pharmacy where it's like you're a robot? You just lay out the recommendations, the consultations, any questions. Okay, good. All right. And just like you said, yeah.
Well, and I always tell people, it is practitioner centered to believe that education, if I just educate the patient, they'll do it. And I always say to any group, physicians, nurses, pharmacists, if education was enough, why would any healthcare professional smoke or be overweight?
Yeah.
Think about that. If it's all we had to do is educate people, if knowing was enough, you shouldn't have any healthcare professionals who smoke or are overweight, right?
Yeah.
Because they know. And so you've got to get, people as, and it's even more so probably today than ever. People don't just use facts. They use how they feel about things. They use their own perception of risk. and you've got to be able to mine down and find out what is it for this person. And you've got to do it in a way that says, look, you're driving the bus. I understand completely. These are your decisions. I want to help you make a better decision toward health, but you decide. You ultimately decide, and I understand that.
That's awesome, Bruce. So we have available now to the RPHLI members your CE course. Can you talk about that a little bit? 8 hours, APCE accredited, all that, right?
Correct. For pharmacists and technicians.
Awesome.
And nurses and physicians and social workers. It's 8 hours of accredited CE. When they sign up, we're going to, RPHLI will give them a code. They'll get $45 off. So they'll get instead of $125, it'll be $80. And once they register, they'll have 3 months to complete the program, and they'll get a certificate and they'll get CE credit. And during that 3 months, the program bookmarks so that you can do 15 minutes today. When you come back, it'll say, do you want to start at the beginning of this module, or do you want to leave off where you were? You can do the program as many times as you want during that 3 months, but you can only get 8 hours of CE credit.
And then
so you can repeat it just to learn more if you want.
And then at the end of the program, I mean, are you ready to just, I mean, it's all about implementing this in your practice, right? I mean, that's what we want, is for you to implement this in your practice. By the end of the CE, or do you feel that those professionals will be ready to implement the motivational interviewing in their everyday consulting and things like that?
If they take it seriously.
Okay.
I mean, obviously there are people that kind of just let it play and get the CE. But I'm saying if they really pay attention, the research shows that a minimum of 8 hours of MICE is necessary to really start internalizing the skills. Okay. So if they take it seriously, yes, the answer is yes, it'll make it. When they start learning this at a deep level, they'll wonder why they ever did it any other way.
Yeah.
Because the other ways are just so contrary to what's needed for people who are not ready to do something.
Fascinating. Yeah. Well, awesome, Bruce. I'm glad. Thank you for providing the course. Thank you for everything, all the work you put into it. And thank you for being a part of RPHLI. I mean, you've been very vocal and collaborative on a lot of support calls, which is amazing. I love hearing your insights all the time, and we'll be seeing a lot of you from here. I always
love being part of groups that have passion or excited. They energize me.
That's awesome, Bruce. All right. Well, thank you again. We'll take care. See you soon.
All right. Thanks.